we're looking at the definition through three lenses here. One is about that engagement to purpose, the work as you described it. One is about creating engagement to each other, the team. And one is about motivating the group to actually go and achieve the goal.
The question is, from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Rob from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
And today's question is how do leaders build engagement?
One of the most frequent questions we get asked when training or coaching managers and leaders is, what do leaders actually do? Is there something like a job description? People just want to know that they're doing the right things. Now, we've researched this and found lots of different opinions about parts of the leader's role, but nothing that brought all of the aspects together in a way that succinctly answered the question. So we built our own model, bringing together the ideas of a disparate set of thought leaders on leadership. The model breaks down the role of a leader into three areas: purpose, people, and productivity, with each of these areas broken down into a further 3 steps. This podcast is focused on people, and in particular, the role of leaders in creating engaged and motivated followers.
So, how do leaders build engagement then?
Well, this is really interesting, isn't it? Because it's engagement through many lenses. So it's about engagement to the work that's being undertaken, engagement to each other, engagement to what might be the purpose itself of either the team or the organisation or both.
So what we're really saying then is for us, we're looking at the definition through 3 lenses here. One is about that engagement to purpose, the work as you described it. One is about creating engagement to each other, the team. And one is about motivating the group to actually go and achieve the goal.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think from a leader's perspective, it's a bit of a juggling act because that's not an easy task. And sometimes when engagement to the purpose is created, which you would argue is probably the first thing to do, or certainly early on, then that tends to be forgotten about, not necessarily by the leader, but by the normal busyness of the everyday. And managers typically will then go and get busy doing things, and the purpose sort of is in the background then.
Yeah, I agree. I think very often the mistake people make is they think of engagement as being, do people like being here? Do people look happy here? Are people kind of enjoying the work? And while I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad measure, true engagement's a bit bigger than that. It's about, do people find meaning in what they're doing? Are people finding, a sense of connection to, as you said before, multiple things. So, one being why we're here, and the other being part of being here, being part of the team. And you have to be engaged at these different levels. And actually, that means as a leader, you've got to kind of constantly be, ensuring the group is coming together, that the people are talking about what the purpose is, what the bigger picture is, what's the meaning of the work that you're doing, and not just, driving through have we done the 57 actions on the list today?
So what sort of things then would a leader do then to help a group understand what the purpose is? What does that look like in practice?
There's got to be an element of being really clear about what that purpose is. So, in answer to your question, Ricky, I think what do leaders do? There's got to be a sense of clarity in the leader's eyes themselves about what the purpose is, and then a communication to other people in such a way that they can buy into that.
Yeah, and I think for me that goes beyond. So, typically you think, okay, we've talked about purpose on a different podcast in this model, but typically you think about, we create the purpose and we all kind of go, yeah, amazing, that's what we're trying to do, woo, type thing. But actually the true buy-in is a bit of more of a negotiation. It's a bit more of a, what does that mean to you? And what does that mean to me? So you just think about us as a business, we're fairly aligned with what we're trying to do. But it's not identical. If we absolutely wrote it down, what we want out of our work and where we're going with things, not only is going to be different between the 3 of us on this call, but it's probably going to change at different times in our lives as well when other things are going on. So I think, part of the leader's role is to manage that constant negotiation of, well, how do you connect to this now? And how do you connect to the team now? And what do you need out of this as well as what can you offer?
So what we're saying then is this is not a one-time only deal. We've got to revisit this on a regular basis. We've also got to test, I imagine, with our people for understanding and connection with that. Because like you say, Paul, the different things going on in our lives, the different situations or places we are in our lives will have an impact in terms of, are we fully in right now, or are we in just enough to get by while we deal with other stuff?
Yeah, very much so.
And helping us to kind of navigate through that, which means that, whilst at the moment, we might have, parents unwell, we might have children unwell, we might be unwell ourselves. There might be other things going on in the family that means actually that might change in 3 months' time, and we need to help you to reconnect to where we're going and what that might look like.
Yeah, and I think that's one side of it. The other side of it for me is actually the purpose might change. And the best example I've ever seen of that is the pandemic, where actually what we were doing, you think back to 18-ish months ago, early 2020. 1 week we were aiming to do this. Next week we're aiming to do something completely different, and that isn't. There's nothing wrong with that. There were necessary things that had to happen, but then you have to go round and get that buy-in again and say, well, okay, we've tweaked this slightly. I'm assuming you get that you get why we've done it and you understand that, but the leader needs to renegotiate. Well, what does that mean for us all, and how engaged are you to this and where we're going now, because we've had to tweak it.
So that talks then to the role of a leader, one of which must be to actually keep the purpose alive. It's a continual, to Ricky's point, it's a continual, almost rebalancing, reconnection. Do we all remember what the purpose was? Because it's either still the same or it's changed slightly, and let's have the continued conversation about how it's changed, why it's changed, what that means to the people that it has an impact on.
I feel like we're playing chop trumps here, because I want to go, I'll take your purpose alive and up you one.
Go on.
I think it's to go one step further. I think it's to keep the buy-in alive. So I think, absolutely, it's really important that we keep the purpose alive in people's heads. But actually, for me, the leader's job is to make sure that purpose remains relevant to the group of people that are committed to delivering against it.
Yeah, it's gonna run dry pretty quickly if we've got a compelling purpose that nobody's bought into.
Sorry, Ricky, I was going to say that might be for no reason. That might not be because they don't believe in it. It might be because other things have come along.
Yeah, back to the timing thing, isn't it?
Yeah. But there's another element in here as well about trust. So, all of that must be about creating the space to build trust between team members, so that it's almost like the purpose, whether it's a newly devised purpose or a reconnection to the purpose, is a sort of a central rallying call that everybody can trust each other around and understand. And it's a common purpose. It's a common way of being able to do things, so that team members can work to that and understand that that's the thing that doesn't really change.
And I think, the engagement part of this model, probably more than all the others, really links to every other part of the model. And I know they all do, but you kind of go, actually, engagement is the role of the leader to pull in all that purpose stuff that we've talked about on previous podcasts, all the productivity stuff that I'm sure we will talk about on future podcasts, and all the people stuff as well, to go, well, actually, the feelings, the psychological safety, the challenges, all of those bits bring together. And engagement is really about the leader mediating across all of that to go, how does this become meaningful for you? Are you connected to what we're doing? Are you connected to us as a group that are doing it, to move that forward? And then once you've got that connection right, how does the leader then engage the energy to kind of make that happen and keep the energy going, particularly when times are tough?
Yeah, because it's one thing understanding what the purpose is and the necessity to buy into it, but another thing entirely to be able to continue to be motivated and to have high levels of energy to just pursue that, almost with a single-minded determination.
Yeah.
What's that quote, Paul, that you found that we use all the time in the work that we do with our clients?
Leaders are the stewards of organizational energy. I can never remember who it's by, and I need to look it up. So I'll hopefully find it and stick it in the podcast description. But I think it's a really kind of challenging thing to kind of go, as a leader, you're walking into that group and you predominantly add energy to the group when it needs it. Sometimes you deliberately pull a bit of energy out of the group to stop it, running off in the wrong direction. You're speeding them up or slowing them down. And when you're doing that consciously, I think that's a really good thing. But often, we've seen it where leaders are actually draining the group of energy, not because they intended to drain the group of energy, but just because of the way they're behaving or the things the leader is doing is taking from the group unnecessarily.
That's a really interesting distinction, because I think it's often seen that, leaders are always about driving forward, increasing energy, increasing motivation, driving the team forward. But your description, Paul, is hinting at, or being very clear, I think, about they also stop the team from getting carried away. Because otherwise we could be charging off perhaps in the wrong direction or at odds with the purpose.
Yeah, I think for me it's, I'm going to use a really crass car analogy, but you go, cars with just an accelerator are not particularly that useful. You need an accelerator and you need a brake. And I think leadership is very much the same, that leaders, as a steward of the energy, engaging people to do the stuff, you're controlling the tempo. And that means you need to be able to rev it up when you need to do it. And you also need to pull it back when you want to pull it back. You need to be able to occasionally pull the team back, whether that's because you want to recalibrate, whether that's because you want to stop them doing something stupid, or whether that's because you just look at them and go, I need to ease the pace off a bit because I can see a big challenge, over the hill, and I need to make sure these guys are rested and ready. That's all part of the leader's job. And if you're doing it, like I say, if you're doing that consciously, I think that's an incredible leadership skill. The alternative is you're going in and, doing whatever you want to do, and the knock-on effects on the team mean that you drain them or send them off in the wrong direction or fire them up unnecessarily, and actually that's quite counterproductive.
Well, I think that's really, really important. I think for years we've seen organizations, we talk about change fatigue all the time, don't we?
Yeah.
And the reality is that organizations, because leaders are at the front of the train, using that analogy that we use quite a lot, for them, a lot of the change or the goals and the objectives for them, they're kind of, once they've communicated them, they've kind of gone, right, now we're on to the next thing. Our job is to go and find that next thing. They forget that they've still left the rest of the train dealing with that, executing that, and struggling with that in quite a lot of times. And therefore, they don't ease up on that accelerator, or they don't apply the brake for a period of time just to allow everybody to catch up, everybody to recharge, which I think is a brilliant analogy, because we just then we go again and we go again and we go again. And the reality is they're just awaiting something to come off the tracks, if you use my train analogy, or actually we're going to bump into the car in front if we use your car analogy, for example.
It's very transport heavy this time, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think the reason is they just explain it really easily, don't they? So, okay, so we've got quite a lot for leaders to think about. They've got this kind of joystick, which they're trying to decide, do I push forward and go faster? Do I hold back? Or do I kind of maintain the speed that we're going at, because that's kind of working for us now? What sort of mistakes are leaders likely to face? Where are they likely to trip up in the engagement of others, of their people?
I think there's a classic that we certainly see a lot, don't we, in the workshops that we're involved in, where instead of focusing necessarily on the purpose, on the why, there's a focus on the what. So, we sort of get, leaders can make that mistake. As I was sort of alluding to before, the purpose has been defined. Everyone sort of seems to know what that is. And then there's a change in emphasis and a focus on getting things done, on the what, being busy, the goals, the objectives. If people lose sight of, or their energy drops, or their motivation drops, or they get too sort of busy with the day-to-day and forget what the purpose is, that's, the leader's job is to bring them back to the why, and that's a mistake that sometimes is made.
And you can see how that happens as well, because, 95% of the time, the conversation is about the tasks and the actions and the things we're doing right now. The why conversation is a small percentage of the amount of time that you spend with the team and you talk about things. And then when things are getting stretched, it's just a really easy thing to drop as well, because it's in that kind of important, urgent thing, it's very important, but it's never urgent. And it doesn't take that long before you've dropped it for so long that you're not talking about it anymore. And you assume everybody gets it the way you get it.
Exactly, but purpose doesn't sit on any KPI charts as far I've never seen it. It certainly doesn't sit in the project plan. It might sit in terms of the start or the kickoff, but how often is it revisited? How often is it built in? So, of course, we get absolutely stuck into deliver, and we forget to check in terms of, okay, can I just check why we're doing this? Can I just check that you're all comfortable that we're still aiming towards this outcome, this North Star that we're trying to create for a greater good for the organisation and our customers or end users, whichever the organisation is that you're serving.
And I think that's particularly true when you look at it, at a team or a group or a division in a large organisation, because if you sat that group of people down and said, what's this company or organisation trying to do, the highest level purpose, the chances are most people would know. It's going to be on the intranet or on a poster somewhere, and it's going to get raised at conferences. But when you say to them, okay, and so what's your bit? What are you trying to deliver against that purpose? What's your reason for being here to support that bigger purpose? It gets a little bit more hard to then define it. And so I think that's the bit for me that often gets left out. It's the idea of a golden thread that says I should be able to join up what I'm working on through to what we're trying to do, through to what my boss's boss is trying to deliver, through to what the organization's trying to deliver. And that does take a little bit of, again, the leader working that through with people and helping them sort that out.
And we're not saying that what's not important. What we're saying is it's what and why. This is what we're trying to achieve because, and continually completing that sentence when they're talking and engaging their people.
I was going to say, the other area I think is worth mentioning that is a common mistake leaders make is they get too rigid or too loose on this. So by too rigid, they get the purpose and it's decided in a room, and they go out to everybody and go, right, we're doing this. This is where we're going. Everybody march in this direction. And purpose doesn't quite work like that. To get the level of buy-in, people need to be able to shape it to their own version of that. And so there needs to be a bit of flexibility in the purpose. The other end of the spectrum is there are going to be people who go, no, don't get it, don't buy in, don't think we're going in the right direction. But leaders look at them and go, oh, but they're quite useful and they've been here a long time. And so we'll keep them around. And so at one end of the spectrum, you demotivate people by having it too tight and not let them have a say. But I think if they have too much say and that say becomes dissent, that's also disengagement at the other end. So it's a real balance to find a channel through the middle of those two things as a leader to go, what's the right level of engagement that I need from everybody here?
Yeah, that's really interesting. And what it was causing me to think about was that, and I think sort of harking back to Ricky's point, we don't get reminded of this often enough. I was thinking classically about engagement surveys, which I think was mentioned a little bit earlier, because there's an engagement survey in an organization which really talks just about engagement without the purpose, is just asking people questions about do they feel a sense of belonging. But no, I haven't seen a single engagement survey which actually links back to the higher purpose of that organization.
Well, they're at risk of being flawed in their outcome because you get what you ask for. And if you're not asking the question that understands the connection, and it's really hard when you want a yes-no response or on a scale of 1 to whatever, it's really hard to demonstrate that. And that's why it always comes back to the leaders and managers of the organization need to invest individual time in order to help people to translate what that means for them in their role, what that means to be part of this team. So keeping people because they're useful actually has a consequence on everybody else. So you might be thinking you're doing the right thing, but what you've just done, as to Paul's point earlier, is you've just disengaged a load of people because they're going, why do they get away with it? We're expected to follow this routine. We're expected to join in and in the main we do, but why do they get away with it? Why are they on a different arrangement to what we are. And that then bleeds into a whole different set of engagement factors.
And I actually wonder if you can go one step further, which is there is sort of a secret message when you do that, when you have those one or two individuals, which is, okay, you're not that serious about this purpose then, because they're allowed to act as if they don't believe, but I'm supposed to believe. So actually, if I do believe in this, my only conclusion, therefore, can be you as the leader don't. And now I'm disengaged because I don't believe you're on our side.
And your trust factors have just been affected significantly.
Yes, yeah. And the them and us sort of language starts to kick in if it wasn't already there.
So I think we sort of round this back to where we started and going, look, this engagement piece is quite complex in this leadership model, because what I think what we're saying is leaders are trying to do two things. They're trying to actually engage people, both to purpose and the group to be part of the team, but they're also then trying to create the energy and the motivation to leverage that engagement through to a deliverable of an outcome, all of which is a constant balance and negotiation. It's not let's go in a room once a year and talk about this, right, we're done for the year. It's a very constant and very individualistic negotiation and dance that the leader does with the followers to drive that through.
I think Ricky's joystick analogy really sums all of that up really nicely, because as soon as you mentioned it, I thought, oh, that's just brilliant, because it's sort of almost every joystick is a spring-loaded joystick, isn't it? So you've got that equilibrium in the middle, but you need to know when to push forwards, when to push back, when to go to one side or the other. So, steering that all through, I think, is a great analogy.
Well, that's really good, Rob, because that leads us into the next piece, which is really about, okay, so we've talked about some of the challenges that leaders could potentially face, some of the ways they could perhaps trip themselves up, even though it's inadvertently. Well, let's leave some tips out there in terms of what could people do then to make this, and obviously the joystick analogy is a very good segue into that, Rob. So, what tips would we give leaders in this space?
Well, let's kick off with, you need to make space to talk about the higher purpose and longer term objectives. It's not just a one-stop shop. You need to make space to continually have that dialogue. Talk about the higher purpose and longer term objectives. So that's one tip.
Paul?
To add to Rob's tip, I think it's constantly explain why you're doing what you're doing. So don't just go, we need to do X, Y, Z. Just add the little bit to the end of the sentence that says, because.
Okay. A third one, I guess, would be to create enough space for the team to connect with each other. So there's a building up of commitment to each other through this commonality of a shared purpose. So, that might be, the understanding of the purpose and the clarity of the purpose might be easier, debatably, for the leader, but it's not so easy for all of the followers. So we need to create the environment, the space to help the team to connect to it and each other.
Yeah, and then the other side of that, obviously, is and then deal with the outliers, deal with the people who drain energy from the team. I always think, and I'm gonna use Harry Potter as an example here, that J.K. Rowling must have worked in a corporate office at some point to create the creature called the Dementor.
Right.
Yeah, that description of the creature that enters the room and sucks hope out of it. Because we've all met that person. And as the leader, if you've got a Dementor, or I think some people call them mood hoovers, or whatever you want to call that particular person, if you've got somebody that's detracting from the team, who's either removing energy or is clearly not committed to the purpose, then actually you have to do something about it. Regardless of what you think they contribute, they're taking more away.
Absolutely. They are costing you more than they're adding, for sure.
Yeah.
So what we've said in terms of top tips then, make space, talk about that higher purpose and the longer term objectives, but make sure we add the because this is why we're doing this. Create that space for the team to connect with each other, build up the commitment to each other, and make sure that that's a shared purpose and support them with that. And then, as Paul quite beautifully described, deal with your dementors because they're costing you a lot.
Yeah, and also remember the cure if you've been subject to a dementor is chocolate. That's my last point on this.
Oh, that's true. I'd forgotten that detail.
Yeah. Again, she clearly worked in an office.
The question is, from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus, and I'm just tagging on the end of this podcast to let you know where you can find more about the leadership model we've been talking about today. If you'd like to know more, maybe see the model in its entirety, or download some free coaching resources to help you think about your leadership style, and then go to www.thinkingfocus.com/what-is-leadership. That's thinkingfocus, all one word, .com/what-is-leadership.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organisation, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.